We made it after that
The
wobble.
last minute.
Okay. I'm going live. 2 seconds. So we can drop a
Yay!
schedule and just
Yeah, it's popped up.
Can hear you.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
put that there. Hi everybody, and thank you so much. And I want to give my deepest apologies. You might hear me rambling for a couple of minutes about how LinkedIn had an absolute meltdown, which it did. So
Had a wobble.
thank you for. I absolutely had a wobble, which is the topic of our conversation today. I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to jump on. If you're here, if you have already jumped off because you're like, what the hell are these guys doing? Then no worries at all. But this will be on LinkedIn so that you can catch up as well. The topic, and we all got together and we were having a thought about how unknown the world is, how unknown business gets. And when business gets challenging or life gets challenging, we often as founders and leaders really struggle to find balance in how we spend our time or what we focus on. And from that, it then ends up causing a hell of a lot of overwhelm, but also stems into other issues where there's other feelings that emerge from that, i.e. feeling guilty that we're not either spending too much time with family or that we can't solve the issues in our business. And we don't really know where the best balance is. So I'm Bella Hegarty. If you don't know me, I am a customer experience and operations consultant, but also the head of client experience and operations at Reconnect. And I'm joined by our two amazing co-founders, Emma, who is our chief reconnector and our head facilitator. So she leads all of our sessions along with a couple of other facilitators as well. And Joe, who is our refuel and movement trainer, so alongside heading up all of our marketing. So she runs a really interactive session with a mix of yoga, kickboxing, all to classical music, and it's an amazing concept that you get so much power and just balance comes out of that in itself and is required for that. And we are joined by our guest expert, Chris Bantock. Now, I mean, I've known Chris for a really long time, and we talk a lot about mental health well-being, and he knows as a exited agency founder, but also now founder of the agency Adventure, which is an advisory and consultancy firm that helps exited agency founders, but also is supported by them to help agency owners on their journey, which is often, and we all know, is a very challenging and really unsteady journey for a lot of different people with a lot of unknowns. And it's just helping you with some really experienced guides who have all been through this themselves to help you get towards there. I hope I've done you all well with that introduction.
Thank you, Bella.
Bringing on our topic today, I don't know who wants to kick off with what does the word balance when it comes to business and life mean to you? I don't know if Chris, you want to kick us off with that one.
Ooh. What does it mean to me? Life is always this. It is a balance. We always talk about work-life balance. That comes up a lot in conversations. So it is a balance, and work life is that balance between what you're doing business-wise and also what you're doing personally. And whenever we have our masterminds and groups and everything else, before we do anything else, we always do a business and a personal score out of 10, because that allows people to understand where somebody is on both the business and the personal side. And if somebody has been having trouble at home, their pet dog has passed away or something like that, it's going to have a big impact on them, and it's going to impact the business side. So balance for me is it's about having that sort of control, and also understanding what that balance looks like, what good looks like, what's normal. And I think if you're in balance, there's sort of the inflow type of scenario where you're feeling good. But what is really challenging is when you get out of balance, when you do have the wobbles.
Now, before I jump into Emma and Joe, I know they'll have lots of thoughts on that. What does it feel like to you when you've been out of balance? Like, how could you describe, or can you describe when you felt out of balance and what that actually, and that wobbly feeling, like, how has that represented itself for you?
For me personally?
Yeah.
It's what people sort of normally call sort of stress, I think. That's the way it sort of comes out with me. You find it very difficult to focus on everything that's going on, other things that you should be focusing on, because you're trying to sort out that one thing. I think it impacts your thinking, your rational thinking, and sometimes that's when you actually make the worst decisions. But yeah, it's that whole feeling of overwhelm, and not knowing what to do right, and how on earth am I going to sort this out? What on earth's going to happen? It's that unknown that's that all these things just add up to having a huge weight on your shoulders and worrying, and then everything that you do normally, sleeping properly, eating properly, exercising properly, all these things just go out the window.
Yeah. I don't know if Emma or Joe, maybe, how do you feel about balance? And I guess what are the scenarios or what comes up for you when you're feeling out of balance?
Yeah, I think for me, it really differs every day, actually. So, and this is something, thanks to Reconnect, that I've kind of come to learn over the last years or so, is that I don't necessarily think there's one way for me personally to be in balance. And often I don't think about it unless I am feeling slightly what I would call out of balance. And then rather than focusing on the being, oh my goodness, I'm not in balance, I need to do something about this. Should I be doing less work today? Should I be doing more exercise than I'm doing? It's about thinking, okay, what feels right for me in this moment to get myself back to a more, I guess, flow feeling, as you described it, Chris. And that could be different every day. And it's the same for, like, in my classes when we do balance exercises, and I have a little trick that I do which helps me to balance. And I've been thinking about this as well, that although that works for me at the moment, it may not always work for me, and it may not work for other people as well. But I find it works for me in this current circumstances where I do my classes, how I do my workouts. But if I was to say, like, sometimes on the Reconnect weekends we do it on the beach, and that all automatically brings in another element, because then you get the sand as well that you need to balance on. So it's changing all the time. So I feel like it's difficult for me to summarize a certain way that I always feel if I'm in balance or if I'm out of balance, if that makes sense.
What about yourself?
Yeah, so as I was looking at yesterday, the original meaning of the word balance comes from the Latin, which is weighing scales. So weighing up two things. And that very much speaks to what Chris was talking about, the work-life balance, comparing my past to my future, comparing where I am now to where I want to be, or where I want my business to be. And then the evolution of the word balance came to mean harmony and equilibrium. What we look at Reconnect is that harmony and that equilibrium is our natural state. So we're in balance until, as Joe pointed to, we have a wobble. And as Chris was pointing to, suddenly something feels very, very important. So we've got some sort of narrative about, oh my God, if I don't sort this out, my business is going to go down. I'm going to, fall out of a good relationship with this person, or I'm not going to have financial security, or whatever is the story that you're telling yourself. That is what takes us out believing that story, and really, like, resisting, I think, as well, resisting the feeling of that story, just like really going over it, round in it in your head, is what takes us out because of stress, as Chris was pointing to. And it's then, as Joe was saying, that we then consider, okay, how can I get back to balance? So it's not that we're not balanced in the first place, it's that we have some sort of story, we have a misunderstanding about how reality is created, thinking that we need to control something in the external world in order to be okay, which isn't true, because at any point we can come back to our natural state of harmony and balance. And so that spirals us off into overthinking, which makes us feel stressed, which causes tension in our body, which we then resist because we don't want to feel it. And it just becomes a cycle until we remember, oh, this is all coming from the inside out. I'm okay no matter what. Come back to clarity. And then whatever occurs to us to do. And as Joe was pointing to, it's not always going to be the same thing. That's why we're creative beings, and that's why we have this creative use of thoughts, that any different idea can occur to us. Sometimes we won't do anything. Like yesterday, for example, I was very sleep deprived because I hadn't had a good night. My baby hadn't slept well, and I was just in, really, really wobbly. And there wasn't really anything that I could do about it. I think I had a 20-minute sleep, which helped, but I kind of just had to accept that was the way the day was going to go, and know that I'd come back and today I feel great.
Yeah. It's really funny though, because I don't know about all of you, but this feeling of what being balanced looks like. I love that analogy of the scales because it paints a really good picture. But I don't know about any of you, but often I feel that balance is really personal to me. So I create what I feel balanced looks like. However, I know that for a lot of, especially now that we're in a space where we're always looking at things like social media on LinkedIn, whatever that is, there's this idea of what balance is supposed to look like for you as either a founder or leader, or even how that, whether that's being able to take time out to go on holiday, working from anywhere, feeling like you can do yoga classes at 5 o'clock in the morning, or you start your day then, and that's what having a balanced life it looks like. It's having time with your family and being able to consistently work on the business or in the business or whatever that looks like. I almost feel like now I see it slightly differently, but even reverse back 6 months ago, and still there are flashes of it. It's like, my life isn't balanced because they're doing that, and that looks more like balance, and that's what balance should be when you're thinking about how much time you should be spending in each place or each location. What are your guys' thoughts on the external influences that tell us how we should feel, or how we should feel when we're unbalanced or in balance?
I think it's interesting because when the way you talked about it, and it's like you then immediately think, okay, if you're in balance, you would be feeling joy all the time. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, because there you could argue, okay, I'm doing what that person is doing. I'm balancing. I've got 20 hours a week working. I'm doing 20 hours a week, my free time with my family. But you could still feel not joyful, or you could still feel stressed. So I think if you're comparing, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be in this joyful balance feeling.
I totally agree with that, and I think it just fills our head with noise. I think it's just noise, noise, noise. When we come to it from a place of what's out there, what different things could I be trying and doing, and that's great. When we come to it from that person is more balanced than me, or my work-life balance is really off, or I desperately need to, then anything we come to is just going to fill our head with more noise.
Yeah, it's interesting because the analogy of the balance, the scales, is very static. It's a point in time, and actually, things are happening all the time. We're moving. We're constantly moving, and I'm a cyclist, as you probably know, and to stay on your bike and to keep balance, because that's all about balance, you have to keep moving. And so, I think the balance analogy is great, but it's a point in time. Am I balanced now? Am I balanced now? Depending on what things have come in and influenced us. So, it's a lot of it is managing those external influences that come onto us, whether that be from partners or work or just pressure we put on ourselves is probably the worst one. That self-comparison bit is ridiculous.
I love that as well. So I was just picturing you on your bike, Chris, and then if you are thinking literally every moment, am I balanced now? Am I balanced now? You're probably going to fall. You probably won't be balanced.
I did definitely have an image of you statically there, Chris, just going like that.
Just going like that.
Am I balanced? Am I balanced?
Yeah, and if he's asking, how am I going to be balanced in 10 minutes? What can I do to be balanced in 10 minutes in my future, in 10 minutes' time? You can see it really clearly there. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually natural. You're naturally just balancing. You're not even thinking about it.
No. Exactly.
And then I love that balance in motion, because that is what the universe is. The universe is harmony in motion all the time, and our bodies are harmony in motion. Nothing stays still in nature if you look around. And yet we try to fix, in order for me to be okay, I need to have this fixed routine that, social media is telling me that I need to have. And this is the way that you manage pressures. And this is what a business owner does. And it's the same with being a mother. This is what, this is what you should be doing with your baby now. This is how much your baby should be sleeping. And it's just a load of rubbish.
It's like you alluded to before, like we create what balance is. If we feel like we're out of balance, that's because we're telling ourselves that we're out of balance, and it's a thought process that we have versus actually being out of balance. Like, how do you recognize when you're out of balance? It's that feeling of overwhelm, like Chris, you alluded to earlier. It's that your head's running a million miles an hour where you're potentially feeling guilty that you're not doing this or not doing that. But there's always going to be those things that test your stress levels, or there's going to be external pressures, because that's the nature of, owning a business and running a business and being a leader in a business. But then it's how you react to that individually makes you feel out of balance. No one else can make you feel out of balance. I think that's what I'm taking from that.
Control the controllables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comes into mind. Again, just to continue the cycling analogy, if you're cycling and looking just in front of where the tyre's hitting the tarmac, that is not the way to ride your bike, because the way to ride your bike is to look ahead, right? So you're not looking at where the tyre's going, where you think you're steering. You're looking ahead so that you can see what's coming down the road. There's a parked car, there's a pothole, and you can only steer around those and keep in balance if you're looking ahead. So, but there are other things like, ridiculous drivers that hate cyclists that almost knock you off, that is out of your control.
And even I would say that looking ahead is still part of your present experience. That's just what you're cycling through at that time. Everything that's going on.
I think there's something around, because you mentioned at the beginning, like work-life balance. I think that's also something that maybe we should stop talking about, because it's not as simple as work and life. It's like work is life as well. And actually a lot of people like their jobs, they don't see it as work. So I think that's generally, everyone should stop talking about work-life balance, because I don't think it helps either, because that's a real comparison thing.
I was thinking about that yesterday. I think it's a real fear-based narrative. My work-life balance. How can I get my work-life balance to be good? Because I'll be okay. I'll only be okay once my work-life balance is as it should be. And the thing is, it's going to change as we're talking about being in motion. Like right now with a baby, I'm working far, far less, and that is just right for me just now. And that there's a time for everything.
But it's when that work-life things create conflict that impact something else. You're lucky because you've got a team around you that can help support you and the business, right? But if the business was just you, then you've got a huge conflict, and you've got to look after the baby, you've got to look after the business, and you just can't make ends ends meet, and that's when you get out of balance, and that's when the stress levels go up.
Well, I
It's really
think in that
interesting.
situation, it's what new occurs to you. That points back to our absolute creativity, finding different ways of creating reality, I suppose. And that's not to say that we're all going to have moments where it feels like it's too much and it's overwhelming. And yet at the same time, I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my mentors, Joe Bailey, and we were talking about balance. He's talking about our inner guidance system, our inner guidance to just know what the next thing is to do. And sometimes it doesn't work out, so we try something else. But it's that knowing that inner guidance is there and that replacing all the stress and the worry that we're so accustomed to. Because when we've spoken about the unknown, there's always unknown. It's not, and this is something that Michael Neal says, it's not the unknown itself, it's what we create the unknown to be that scares us.
Yeah.
It's really funny you say that, actually, because being completely honest, and I don't know if I really should share this on LinkedIn, I was actually having a conversation with my partner about this because my business, not Reconnect, is just me. And obviously, I've only just turned 30. I've got a hell of a lot of time to think about this. But the thought is already there as to there is no way on this earth I could have a child, because the amount of time, like the amount of effort as to what it takes, I'm not going to have the ability to be able to balance work and personal life. And I know that I'm probably I'm just speaking to three individuals that all have kids. So it's a very different perspective when you're there and you're going through it. But actually, that already pre-thought of being out of balance and not having the time to balance both is absolutely freaking terrifying. Like, so much so that the thought of not having kids is way greater in my mind, because I don't want to give anything up. I don't want to have to feel out of balance when I've created this life that is very much in balance. And that is a very vulnerable thing I realized I've just shared on LinkedIn. But I think what I would love to, and I'm conscious of the fact that we've only got like 7 minutes left, even though we ran over, but I do want to ask you guys, if someone is feeling out of balance, and I guess take this from personal experiences, is like, how would you be able to find balance again?
Can I really quickly speak to what you said, Bella?
Yeah.
Just briefly, because I so get you, because I felt exactly the same before having a baby. And I think what it points to as well is that when we think what something's going to be like, it's never the same as what something is like when it happens. And that is what's constantly taking us out of balance in the moment, sort of stressing about how something could be or something, and getting, oh, shouldn't I, da, 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 da. And all of it's kind of irrelevant because stuff's just happening anyway. And Chris is right. I'm very, very lucky to be part of the Reconnect team and working with you guys. And I think that all just kind of came together miraculously around the same kind of time that I got pregnant. I could never have planned that. So it's also saying that we're part of this bigger picture, this bigger balance that's just kind of happening and working through us, through and for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating and I think it's really exciting. And I definitely have days or moments even when I feel out of balance. But what is really cool is that can change the next 5 minutes. Something can happen and it can completely change everything. And I find that like amazing. And I'm seeing that more and more. That, yeah, again, to what you were saying, Bella, that is actually how you're envisioning it at the moment. But that's in your head. That's not the reality. And I think the reality can look very different. And I find that really exciting.
But I'd also add to this, because you shared something very personal. From what you said, it sounds like you're trying to take on everything yourself. It's all you, and it's not. That's the reality. When things happen, people step up. When things happen, other things happen. So, I think, Emma said, what you said about what you make the future, you put it far more eloquently than I can, but whatever you think the future is going to be is whatever you sort of cook up in your head.
Yeah.
And it can be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowing now, like upon reflection, like that's always a thought process. You create the thoughts that you're in or out of balance. When times get challenging, I would encourage anybody to just sit and reflect, is like, is this actually out of balance, or am I just thinking that it is? And if I'm thinking that it is, what can I do just to quieten that down so that I can actually get some headspace? And it's about giving yourself the space to recognize and actually then move forward past that when you know that it's a temporary state. You're not always going to feel out of balance. It's something, like Emma always describes it as, a storm. And I love the way that you articulate this, is like any thoughts that you have, whether they're negative or this feeling of out of balance or that times are really challenging right now, that doesn't always have to be that way. Whenever a storm comes, you know that the storm isn't a permanent thing. The storm does pass and there's blue skies at the end of it. It's just that how we react to that at that time dictates how long that storm is there. And I
I
think
love
that's
that
always something
expression, but whatever it is, if a storm's coming, don't hide, just learn to dance in the rain.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm very wary of before and after stories. Before I was really stressed, and now I'm like, yeah, okay, there's definitely, that's one of my stories. But that doesn't mean you don't have stormy days, and balance is about having storms as well as having sun. And in being able to see that and knowing that you're always going to return to the sun is everything.
Yeah.
And I like what Joe said about how exciting it is about what's the way this time that I'm going to return to the sun. It's really cool.
I think there's nothing wrong with wobbling, and there's nothing wrong with having thoughts that you then think, oh, I don't want to be thinking this. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just then seeing it for what it is, and then in the next moment you might feel completely differently, and not dwelling on the wobbling or the thought.
Absolutely. I mean, to lead into, we at Reconnect, and I know Chris has spoken about this as well, and I'm sure he's shared with his community. So if you haven't been if you're an agency owner and are interested in getting or advisory, or you're looking for a community, I say a community, Chris has an amazing adventure playground that is full of other agency owners that are going through other challenges. And alongside that, it's often nice to not go through different things alone. So having an advisor or a bunch of advisors or guides to be able to help you navigate this process is so powerful. So you don't feel like when everything feels a bit too much, you're in that process on your own. If balance specifically, or that feeling of how can I keep performing but also be there for my family, we're finding we're having really challenging times at the moment within the business. How do we get out of that? How do I understand where to balance my time, or just feel to how I can manage those pressures? At Reconnect, we're actually doing a day event on the 24th of April in Shoreditch. It's a full day retreat to help you be able to find balance. We've got all food included. There's refuel in the afternoon, some amazing sessions led by Emma that are extremely interactive and very experimental, and I'm really looking forward to them. And I'll drop the link in the comments of this so that if you are interested, come and join us, and we would love to see you there. I want to thank you all for bearing with us, and apologies for our late starting and late finishing. Next time, hopefully, LinkedIn will sort itself out with four speakers on this. But I want to thank you all for your participation and conversations and honesty coming into how we can find balance during challenging times.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you very much, Bella.